Marcus Chen gripped the controls of his damaged fighter craft as alarms screamed through the cramped cockpit. Sparks flew from fried circuits while emergency lights bathed everything in hellish red. Through the cracked viewport, the alien space station Nexus 7 grew larger by the second. His ship was dying, and he had maybe 30 seconds before complete system failure. The human pilot had been part of a desperate rescue mission to extract Ambassador Rodriguez from the vampire-controlled station. Intelligence suggested the diplomatic envoy had been taken during failed peace negotiations between the Terran Federation and the Sanguine Empire. What intelligence had not mentioned was the massive fleet of vampire warships waiting in ambush. Marcus had watched his squadron get torn apart by crimson energy beams that seemed to drink the light from space itself. Captain Torres had screamed over the calm as his fighter dissolved around him. Lieutenant Park's ship had simply vanished, consumed by some kind of blood-red energy field. Marcus was the only survivor, and his ship was running on fumes and prayer. The docking bay of Nexus 7 rushed toward him. Marcus killed the engines and let momentum carry his fighter through the atmospheric barrier. The ship hit the deck hard, skidding across polished black metal before slamming into a stack of cargo containers. The impact threw him against his restraints, and everything went dark for a moment. When consciousness returned, Marcus could hear the hiss of escaping atmosphere from his ruptured hull. He unbuckled himself and grabbed his sidearm, a standard-issue plasma pistol that probably would not do much against vampire technology. The canopy release had jammed, so he kicked it until the mechanism gave way with a grinding shriek of metal. The docking bay was massive, easily large enough to hold a dozen Earth destroyers. The architecture was distinctly alien, all flowing curves and organic shapes that seemed grown rather than built. Bioluminescent veins pulsed through the walls, casting shifting patterns of blue and purple light across everything. The air tasted metallic, with an underlying sweetness that made Marcus think of copper pennies and overripe fruit. He climbed out of his fighter and immediately noticed the gravity was lighter than Earth standard. Each step felt bouncy, like walking on a trampoline. His boots echoed strangely in the vast space, creating multiple overlapping sounds that seemed to whisper back from the curved walls. Marcus had studied vampire physiology during his military training. They were an ancient race that had evolved on a world with heavy radiation and metallic seas. Their bodies required regular infusions of iron-rich blood to maintain their enhanced strength and regenerative abilities. They could survive in hard vacuum for limited periods and possessed reflexes that made them deadly in close combat. What the training manuals had not prepared him for was how beautiful their architecture could be. Despite everything, Marcus found himself admiring the alien elegance of his surroundings. The vampire designers had created something that was both functional and artistic, a perfect fusion of technology and biology. A sound made him freeze. Footsteps were approaching from deeper in the station, accompanied by a low humming that seemed to vibrate through his bones. Marcus raised his weapon and backed against his damaged fighter, using it for cover. The footsteps were getting closer, along with what sounded like voices speaking in a language that was all flowing vowels and clicking consonants. 3 vampire warriors rounded a corner and spotted him immediately. They were tall and pale, with elongated limbs and faces that were hauntingly beautiful despite their obvious alien nature. Each wore form-fitting armor that seemed to be made of living metal, shifting and flowing as they moved. Their eyes glowed with internal light, like stars burning in deep space. Marcus opened fire without hesitation. His plasma bolt struck the lead vampire center mass, but the alien armor absorbed the energy with barely a flicker. The warrior smiled, revealing fangs that gleamed like polished silver. In return, the vampire raised a weapon that looked like crystallized blood and fired a beam of crimson energy. The human pilot dove aside as the energy beam sliced through the air where his head had been. The beam struck his fighter and carved through the hull like it was made of soft butter. Marcus rolled behind a cargo container as more energy beams crisscrossed the space around him. His plasma pistol was useless against their armor, but he kept firing anyway, hoping to at least slow them down. One of the vampires moved with impossible speed, appearing beside his hiding spot before Marcus could react. The alien grabbed him by the throat with one clawed hand and lifted him off the ground. Marcus gasped as his feet left the deck, the vampire's grip cutting off his air supply. The creature studied him with those burning eyes, tilting its head like a curious bird. The vampire spoke in accented but understandable English. "Human pilot. You are far from your breeding worlds. Why do you come to sacred Nexus 7? Marcus tried to speak but could only manage a choking sound. The vampire's grip loosened slightly, allowing him to draw a ragged breath. "Rescue mission," he wheezed. "Looking for our ambassador." The three vampires exchanged glances and spoke rapidly in their own language. Marcus caught what sounded like disagreement, with one vampire gesturing toward the interior of the station while another pointed at him. Finally, the one holding him seemed to reach a decision. "Come, human. High Priestess Violara will want to examine you before we drain your blood for the sacred pools." They marched him through corridors that defied human architectural logic. Walls curved into floors without clear boundaries, and bioluminescent patterns shifted constantly, creating a sense of movement even when standing still. Vampire citizens moved past them in the corridors, all tall and pale and beautiful in their alien way. They stared at Marcus with curiosity rather than hostility, as if he were some exotic animal being brought to a zoo. The deeper they went into the station, the more elaborate the decoration became. Flowing sculptures that seemed alive lined the walls, and pools of what looked like liquid starlight reflected shifting patterns on the ceiling. Marcus had never imagined that vampires could create such beauty. Human propaganda had painted them as monsters, bloodthirsty parasites that fed on other species. Seeing their art and architecture up close forced him to reconsider everything he thought he knew about them. They entered a vast chamber that took Marcus's breath away. The ceiling stretched up into darkness, supported by columns that twisted like frozen DNA helixes. Bioluminescent vines grew along the walls, pulsing with gentle light that made the whole space feel alive. In the center of the chamber stood a throne made from what looked like crystallized blood, and seated upon it was the most beautiful creature Marcus had ever seen. High Priestess Violara was clearly ancient even by vampire standards, but age had not diminished her beauty. Her skin was pale as moonlight, stretched over aristocratic bones that could have been carved by a master sculptor. Her hair fell in silver waves to her waist, and her eyes burned with the light of distant stars. She wore robes that seemed to be cut from liquid shadow, flowing and shifting as if made of living darkness. The vampire warriors forced Marcus to his knees before the throne. Violara studied him with those burning eyes, her expression unreadable. When she spoke, her voice was like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "So, a human warrior comes to our sacred station, seeking to steal from us what we have rightfully claimed. Tell me, small mortal, what makes you think your short life has value enough to trade for that of your ambassador?" Marcus straightened his shoulders and met her gaze directly. "Because every life has value. That's what separates us from monsters." A collective hiss went up from the vampire guards, and one stepped forward as if to strike him. Violara raised one elegant hand, and the warrior froze in place. "Interesting," she said, leaning forward on her throne. "You call us monsters, yet you speak of the value of life. Do you know what your people have done to our colonies, human? Do you know of the billions of our young ones that your weapons have turned to ash?" Marcus felt his confidence waver. The war between humans and vampires had been raging for decades, but he had only seen one side of the story. In the military, they were taught that vampires were the aggressors, expanding their empire by consuming other species. But, looking at Violara now, he saw something in her ancient eyes that might have been grief. "I know that war makes monsters of us all," he said finally. "But, maybe it doesn't have to be that way." Violara was quiet for a long moment, studying him with an intensity that made his skin crawl. Finally, she spoke to her guards in their flowing language. Marcus caught a few words that sounded like commands, but he could not understand the full meaning. Two of the guards moved to flank him while the third disappeared deeper into the chamber. Violara rose from her throne with fluid grace and descended the steps toward Marcus. Up close, she was even more imposing, easily 7 feet tall with the predatory grace of a born hunter. "Your ambassador is dying," she said without preamble. "The interrogation process has been intensive. His human physiology cannot withstand our methods much longer. In perhaps 2 of your hours, he will expire." Marcus felt his heart sink. "Then, let me see him. Let me help him." Violara smiled, revealing fangs like crystal daggers. "Oh, you will help him, human pilot. But perhaps not in the way you imagine." She gestured, and the third guard returned leading a procession of vampire attendants. They carried between them a figure that Marcus barely recognized as human. Ambassador Rodriguez had been a robust man in his 50s, with graying hair and laugh lines around his eyes. The broken thing the vampires carried looked ancient, his skin pale and waxy, his breathing shallow and labored. They laid him on a platform in front of the throne, and Marcus could see the extent of the damage. Rodriguez's hands were covered in what looked like burn marks, and his eyes were clouded and unfocused. When he breathed, a wet rattling sound came from his chest. "Ambassador," Marcus said, moving toward the platform. The guards allowed it, though they kept their weapons ready. "Sir, I'm Marcus Chen, 7th Fighter Squadron. I'm here to get you home." Rodriguez's eyes focused on him with visible effort. When he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "Chen, you shouldn't have come. They're not what we thought, not monsters, just different. Save your strength, sir. We're going home." Rodriguez coughed, and flecks of blood stained his lips. "No, too late for me. But maybe not too late to stop the war, if someone could understand them." Vayalara knelt beside the platform with surprising gentleness. "Your ambassador has been most enlightening, human pilot. He has helped us understand that perhaps there are those among your species capable of wisdom. Unfortunately, his body is failing despite our efforts to preserve him." Marcus looked between Rodriguez and the vampire priestess, his mind racing. "What do you mean, efforts to preserve him?" "We attempted to supplement his failing biology with our own life essence," Vayalara explained. "But human and vampire physiologies are too different. The process is killing him more quickly than his injuries would have." Rodriguez grabbed Marcus's sleeve with a trembling hand. "She's telling the truth, they've been trying to keep me alive, not torture me. The burns, that was from my ship's explosion during capture. They've been trying to heal me." Marcus stared at Vayalara in shock. "You've been trying to save him?" "Of course." The priestess seemed genuinely puzzled by his surprise. "He came to us under a flag of diplomatic immunity. Despite our people's conflicts, we are not without honor. But our medical technology is incompatible with human biology. We cannot save him." Rodriguez's breathing was getting worse. Marcus could see death approaching in the ambassador's clouded eyes. Without thinking, he made a decision that would change everything. "What if you used human blood instead? Would that work?" Vayalara's eyes widened slightly. "Human blood contains the correct biological markers, yes. But the volume required would likely kill the donor. And we have no human volunteers." Marcus looked at Rodriguez, seeing the pain in the older man's face. The ambassador had dedicated his life to preventing wars, to finding peaceful solutions to impossible problems. If there was even a chance to save him. "You have one now," Marcus said, rolling up his sleeve. "Take what you need." The vampire guards exchanged shocked glances, speaking rapidly in their own language. Vayalara held up a hand for silence, her burning eyes fixed on Marcus. "You would give your life for his? A human you barely know? He's not just anyone. He's a peacemaker. If anyone can find a way to end this war, it's him." Besides, Marcus managed a weak smile. "You said the donor would likely die, not definitely. I like those odds better than fighting my way out of here." Vayalara was quiet for a long moment, studying Marcus with an intensity that made him feel like she was reading his soul. Finally, she spoke. "Very well, human pilot. But, know this, if we do this thing, you will be forever changed. Vampire blood magic leaves marks on those it touches. You may find yourself bound to us in ways you do not expect." Marcus nodded without hesitation. "Do it." The ritual chambered deep within Nexus 7 hummed with ancient power. Crystalline formations jutted from the walls, pulsing with bioluminescent energy that cast dancing shadows across the curved surfaces. Marcus lay on a platform made from what looked like living metal, its surface warm against his back. Tubes and wires connected his arm to a complex apparatus that monitored his vital signs while slowly drawing his blood. Ambassador Rodriguez occupied a similar platform nearby, though his setup was far more elaborate. Vampire medical technology surrounded him like a mechanical forest, each device serving some purpose Marcus could not fathom. The ambassador's breathing had steadied somewhat, but he remained unconscious as alien machinery worked to repair his damaged body. High Priestess Vayalara moved between the platforms with practiced efficiency, monitoring readouts on displays that showed information in flowing vampire script. Other vampires assisted her, their movements precise and coordinated like dancers performing a well-rehearsed routine. Marcus watched them work and found himself impressed by their obvious skill and dedication. "How long have your people been practicing medicine?" he asked, partly from curiosity and partly to distract himself from the needle in his arm. Vayalara glanced at him, surprised by the question. "We have been healers for over 10,000 of your years. Before we learned to travel between the stars, we developed our medical arts to survive the harsh radiation of our homeworld. Every vampire is trained in the basics of life preservation from childhood." 10,000 years, Marcus repeated, awed. "Humans have only had spaceflight for 3 centuries. Yes. We are an ancient people. Perhaps too ancient, according to some of the younger generation." Vayalara adjusted a control, and Marcus felt a slight tingling sensation as the blood draw apparatus recalibrated itself. "They believe we should abandon our old ways and embrace the violence that seems to characterize younger species." Marcus thought about the war raging between their peoples, the countless ships destroyed and lives lost. Maybe the young ones have a point. The universe seems pretty violent. Perhaps. But age brings perspective that youth often lacks. I have seen civilizations rise and fall, watched species destroy themselves through their own aggression. Violence may seem like strength, but it is often the refuge of those too weak to find better solutions. The apparatus beeped softly, and one of the vampire assistants spoke to Vayalara in their musical language. She nodded and made another adjustment to the machinery surrounding Rodriguez. The ambassador's color seemed to be improving, though he remained deeply unconscious. "Is it working?" Marcus asked. "The transfusion is proceeding well. Your blood is remarkably compatible with the healing process, though I confess I do not fully understand why. Human physiology should be too different from ours for such synergy to exist." Marcus felt a wave of dizziness as more blood left his system. The vampires had assured him they would not take more than he could safely lose, but his body was beginning to protest the process. His vision blurred slightly, and he had to grip the edges of the platform to steady himself. Vayalara noticed his distress immediately. "Are you experiencing discomfort? We can slow the extraction rate if necessary." "I'm fine," Marcus said, though he clearly was not. "How much more do you need?" "Perhaps another quarter of your total blood volume. Your ambassador's injuries were extensive, and the healing process requires significant biological material to repair the damage." Marcus nodded, trying to ignore the growing weakness in his limbs. A quarter of his blood was approaching the dangerous limit for human donors, but Rodriguez needed every advantage they could give him. The ambassador was humanity's best hope for ending this war peacefully. One of the vampire assistants approached Vayalara and spoke urgently in their native tongue. The priestess frowned and moved to a different console, studying readouts that meant nothing to Marcus. After a moment, she returned to his platform with an expression he could not read. "There appears to be a complication," she said carefully. "Your blood is not simply providing biological material for the healing process. It seems to be bonding with our medical technology in unexpected ways." "What kind of ways?" Vayalara gestured to the apparatus surrounding Rodriguez. "The healing matrix is operating at efficiency levels we have never before achieved. Your blood is somehow amplifying the effectiveness of our technology, allowing it to repair damage that should be beyond our capabilities." Marcus tried to sit up, but dizziness forced him back down. "That's good news, right? It means the ambassador will recover?" "Yes, but it also means the bonding process I warned you about is proceeding much faster than anticipated. Your biological essence is becoming intertwined with our systems in ways that may prove irreversible." Before Marcus could ask what that meant, alarms began blaring throughout the station. The soft lighting in the medical chamber shifted to harsh red, and vampire voices could be heard shouting in the corridors outside. Vayalara's expression hardened as she moved to a communication console and spoke rapidly with someone on the other end. "What's happening?" Marcus demanded, struggling against the tubes and wires connecting him to the medical apparatus. "A human battle fleet has arrived," Vayalara said grimly. "They are demanding the return of their personnel and threatening to destroy the station if we refuse to comply." Marcus felt his heart sink. The rescue fleet had found them, but their timing could not have been worse. If they attacked now, they would kill Rodriguez just as the healing process was beginning to work. Worse, they would destroy any chance of the peace the ambassador had been trying to negotiate. "You have to let me talk to them," Marcus said, trying to disconnect himself from the medical apparatus. "If I can explain what's happening here, maybe we can avoid a fight." Vayalara caught his hands before he could damage the delicate equipment. The transfusion process cannot be interrupted now. If we stop the treatment, your ambassador will die within minutes. And, you have already given too much blood to survive disconnection from our life support systems. Then, patch me through to their communications. I can talk to them from here. The vampire priestess hesitated, clearly weighing the risks. Around them, the medical team continued their work despite the alarms, their movements becoming more urgent as they tried to accelerate Rodriguez's treatment. The ambassador's vital signs were improving steadily, but he was still far from stable. Very well, Violara decided. But, you must understand, human pilot, that your fleet's arrival has placed us all in grave danger. My people are preparing for battle, and, once vampire blood is aroused, it is difficult to calm. She activated a communication array that rose from the floor beside Marcus's platform. The display showed static for a moment before resolving into the stern face of Admiral Harrison, Marcus's commanding officer. The Admiral's expression shifted from relief to confusion as he took in the scene. Shan? What the hell is your situation? We've been tracking your fighter's emergency beacon, but these readings make no sense. Admiral, listen carefully. I'm aboard the vampire station undergoing a medical procedure to save Ambassador Rodriguez. The vampires have been trying to heal him, not torture him. If you attack now, you'll kill us both. Admiral Harrison's face darkened. Chen, you're clearly under duress. Are they forcing you to say this? No sir, I'm here voluntarily. The vampire priestess has been helping us, but the process can't be interrupted. I need you to hold off any attacks until we can complete the treatment. That's not going to happen, son. We have reports of vampire fleets massing throughout this sector. This could be a trap designed to lure our forces into an ambush. Marcus felt desperation rising in his chest. Admiral, you have to trust me on this. I've seen things here that change everything we thought we knew about the vampires. They're not the monsters we believe them to be. You've been compromised, Chen. We're coming to get you and the ambassador out of there, whether these bloodsuckers like it or not. The communication cut off, leaving Marcus staring at a blank screen. Around the medical chamber, the vampire assistants worked with increasing urgency. Violara returned to his platform with a grim expression. Your fleet is powering weapons and moving into attack formation. My people have responded by raising shields and preparing our own defenses. We have perhaps 10 minutes before the shooting begins. Marcus closed his eyes, feeling the weight of failure settling over him. He had come here to rescue Rodriguez and had instead started a battle that would likely kill them all. Worse, the ambassador's peace mission would die with them, ensuring that the war between humans and vampires would continue for generations. How much longer does Rodriguez need? He asked. At least 20 minutes for basic stabilization. An hour for complete healing. We don't have an hour. Is there anything we can do to speed up the process? Violara was quiet for a moment, her burning eyes studying the readouts around Rodriguez's platform. There is one possibility, but it would require a significant sacrifice on your part. What kind of sacrifice? The healing process is currently limited by the rate at which we can introduce your blood into the matrix. If we increase the extraction rate significantly, we could complete the treatment in minutes rather than hours. Marcus understood immediately. But that much blood loss would kill me. Almost certainly, yes. Your human physiology cannot survive the loss of more than 40% of your blood volume, and we would need at least 50% to achieve rapid healing. The station shuddered as the first energy beams struck its shields. Through the crystalline walls, Marcus could see the blazing lights of human warships engaged in battle with vampire defenders. The fight he had hoped to prevent was beginning, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Unless. Do it, Marcus said quietly. I cannot ask you to sacrifice your life, human pilot. There must be another way. There isn't time for another way. Marcus gripped Violara's hand with his free arm, surprised by how warm her skin felt. Rodriguez is the key to ending this war. If he dies, billions more will follow. My life is a small price to pay to prevent that. The vampire priestess studied his face, searching for any sign of doubt or fear. What she found instead was determination and a quiet peace that seemed to surprise her. You would die for a species not your own, she asked softly. I would die to save both our species, Marcus corrected. Humans and vampires don't have to be enemies. Rodriguez proved that by coming here in the first place. Someone needs to carry his message back to our people. The station shuddered again, this time more violently. Emergency lights began flashing as damage reports echoed through the corridors. Vayalara looked at the communication console, then, back at Marcus. Very well. But, know this, brave human, your sacrifice will not be forgotten. If we survive this day, your name will be honored among our people for as long as memory endures. She moved to the extraction apparatus and began adjusting controls with swift, decisive movements. The flow rate increased dramatically, and Marcus felt the life beginning to drain from his body. His vision dimmed around the edges, and his heartbeat became irregular as his cardiovascular system struggled to cope with the massive blood loss. But Rodriguez's vital signs were improving rapidly. The vampire medical technology was working at peak efficiency now, repairing damage at a rate that seemed almost miraculous. The ambassador's color returned to normal, and his breathing became strong and steady. Marcus smiled despite the darkness closing in around him. Rodriguez would live. The ambassador would return to human space with proof that vampires were capable of mercy and honor. Maybe, just maybe, the war could end before it consumed both their civilizations. As consciousness faded, Marcus heard Vayalara speaking urgently to her assistants. The vampire priestess sounded different now, her voice filled with an emotion he had not heard before. Was it regret? Or something else entirely? The last thing he remembered before the darkness claimed him was the sensation of cold hands touching his face, and a voice speaking words in a language he did not understand but somehow felt he should. Marcus woke to the sound of gentle music, something like wind chimes mixed with flowing water. The melody seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, filling his consciousness before his eyes opened. When he finally managed to focus, he found himself staring at a ceiling that looked like crystallized starlight, patterns of light flowing across its surface in mesmerizing waves. He tried to sit up and discovered his body felt completely different. There was no weakness from blood loss, no fatigue from his ordeal. Instead, he felt stronger than he had ever been in his life. His senses seemed sharper too. He could hear conversations in distant parts of the station, could smell the metallic sweetness of vampire technology, could see details in the room that should have been impossible to discern in the dim lighting. "You are awake," said a familiar voice. Vayalara moved into his field of vision, but something about her was different. She looked younger somehow, her pale skin carrying a subtle luminescence that had not been there before. Her silver hair seemed to shine with its own light, and her burning eyes held depths that made him think of infinite space. "I should be dead," Marcus said, his voice coming out stronger and clearer than expected. "How much blood did you take?" "Enough to kill a human, yes. But you are no longer entirely human." Vayalara settled into a chair beside his platform, her movements filled with liquid grace. "The bonding process I warned you about completed itself during the transfusion. Your essence became so intertwined with our medical technology that separation would have meant death for both you and the ambassador." Marcus studied his hands, noticing that his skin had taken on a slight translucent quality. Veins of pale light seemed to flow just beneath the surface, pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat. "What exactly am I now?" "Something that has never existed before. Part human, part vampire, but fully neither. The biological matrix created during the healing process has made you into something new." Vayalara leaned forward, her expression mixing fascination with what might have been concern. "We do not know what capabilities you may possess, or what limitations you might face. What about Rodriguez? Did he survive?" "More than survived. Your sacrifice allowed complete cellular regeneration. He has awakened fully healed and is currently in discussions with our diplomatic corps. The battle that threatened to destroy us all has been suspended while both sides attempt to understand what has occurred here." Marcus swung his legs off the platform and stood, surprised by how steady he felt. The room remained perfectly in focus despite his movement, and he could sense the electromagnetic fields generated by the vampire technology around him. It was like having a new sense organ that detected energy patterns invisible to normal humans. "I need to see him," Marcus said. "I need to make sure he's really all right." Vayalara nodded and led him from the medical chamber through corridors that seemed somehow more alive than before. Marcus could perceive the bioluminescent networks that ran through the station's structure, could feel the pulse of energy that powered its systems. The vampire citizens they passed stared at him with mixtures of curiosity and awe, as if he were some unprecedented phenomenon. They found Rodriguez in what appeared to be a conference room, seated at a crystalline table across from several vampire officials. The ambassador looked exactly as he had before his capture, robust, alert, and completely human. When he saw Marcus enter, his face broke into a relieved smile. "Shun. Thank God you're alive. When Priestess Violara told me what you had done." Rodriguez stood and gripped Marcus's hand firmly. "I can never repay what you sacrificed for me. Just make it count, sir. Use what you've learned here to stop this war." "I intend to." The vampires have shared information about the conflict that completely changes our understanding of the situation. The attacks on human colonies that started this war were not ordered by their government. They were conducted by a rogue faction that has since been eliminated by vampire authorities. Marcus stared at him. "You mean the entire war has been based on a misunderstanding?" "Worse than that. The rogue vampires were acting in response to human mining operations that were poisoning their sacred breeding grounds. They believed we were deliberately attempting genocide against their young. Meanwhile, we thought they were expanding their empire by consuming other species." One of the vampire officials spoke up in accented English. "Both our peoples have been manipulated by extremists who benefit from continued conflict. Arms dealers, territorial governors who profit from military contracts, colonial administrators who use the war to justify their expansion into neutral space." Rodriguez nodded grimly. "There are factions on both sides that want this war to continue. They've been feeding misinformation to their respective governments, ensuring that any attempt at peace would fail. But now we have proof of the deception, and witnesses who can testify to the truth." Marcus felt hope rising in his chest for the first time since this whole crisis began. "So the war can actually end? If we can get the right information to the right people, yes. But that's where we face our biggest challenge." Rodriguez gestured to a display showing star charts marked with fleet positions. "The battle fleets are still facing each other outside this station. Both sides are preparing for a massive engagement that could escalate the conflict beyond any hope of peaceful resolution." Violara moved to the display and touched one of the markers. "My people have dispatched envoys to the vampire fleet, but they are young warriors who have lost friends to human weapons. Their blood runs hot for vengeance, and they may not listen to words of peace." "Same problem with Admiral Harrison," Rodriguez added. "He's a good man, but he's lost 2 sons in this war. Convincing him to stand down when vampire ships are pointing weapons at his fleet." He shook his head. "It would take a miracle." Marcus studied the tactical display, his enhanced senses allowing him to process the complex information with startling clarity. He could see the positions of both fleets, could calculate firing solutions and probable battle outcomes with mathematical precision. More importantly, he could perceive energy signatures that revealed which ships were powered up for combat and which were merely maintaining defensive postures. "What if there was someone both sides would trust?" Marcus asked slowly. "Someone who had connections to both species?" Violara's eyes widened as she understood his meaning. "You cannot be serious. The transformation you have undergone is unprecedented. We do not know how either side would react to your altered state. But I'm still human enough that my own people would recognize me, and vampire enough that your people might listen to me. If I could get both fleet commanders to talk to each other directly." Rodriguez was already shaking his head. "Chen, you've done enough. We can't ask you to put yourself at risk again. With respect, sir, I'm the only one here who might be able to pull this off. Admiral Harrison knows me, trusts my judgment. And Priestess Violara seems to have some influence with vampire leadership." "More than some," one of the vampire officials interjected. "High Priestess Violara is daughter to the Sanguine Empress, heir to the throne of our empire. Her word carries the weight of law among our people." Marcus turned to stare at Violara, who seemed uncomfortable with the revelation. "You're a princess? And you didn't think to mention this?" "Titles are irrelevant in the face of necessity," she said stiffly. "You needed medical assistance, and I provided it. My bloodline did not matter in that moment. It matters now," Marcus pointed out. "If you speak for the Vampire Empire, and I can convince Admiral Harrison to listen, we might actually be able to arrange a ceasefire." Rodriguez was studying Marcus intently. "You look different, son. Not just physically, but there's something in your eyes that wasn't there before." Are you sure you're thinking clearly? Marcus considered the question seriously. His thought processes did feel different, faster, more intuitive, able to perceive connections and patterns that would have escaped him before. But his core motivations remained unchanged. He still wanted to prevent unnecessary death, still believed that war should be a last resort rather than a first choice. I'm thinking more clearly than I ever have, he said finally. And what I see is two fleets full of people who don't want to die for a war based on lies and misunderstandings. If there's a chance to save even some of those lives, I have to try. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed his words. Finally, Vylara spoke. The transformation process has created a bond between us, she said quietly. I can sense your emotional state, can feel the truth of your intentions. You truly believe you can prevent this battle. I have to believe it. What's the alternative? Vylara exchanged glances with the other vampire officials, who nodded almost imperceptibly. Very well. I will arrange communications with both fleet commanders. But, understand, Marcus Chen, that if this fails, you may find yourself caught between two opposing forces with nowhere to run. If this fails, everyone dies anyway, Marcus replied. At least this way, we're trying to save them. Rodriguez clasped Marcus on the shoulder. Then, let's make the attempt. But, I want to be part of this conversation too. As Earth's official representative, I need to be involved in any negotiation. Within minutes, Vylara had established a three-way communication link connecting Nexus 7 with both fleet commanders. The main display showed Admiral Harrison's weathered face alongside that of Fleet Commander Zephyr, a vampire military leader whose aristocratic features were marked with ritual scars that indicated high rank. Both commanders began speaking at the same time, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of accusations and demands. Marcus let them vent for a few moments before raising his hand for silence. Admirals, I know you both have reasons to be angry. I know you've both lost people in this war. But, before you start shooting at each other, I need you to listen to what Ambassador Rodriguez has learned about how this whole conflict began. Admiral Harrison focused on Marcus for the first time, and his expression shifted to one of shock. Chen? What the hell happened to you? You look different, yes sir. I'll explain that later. Right now, we need to focus on preventing a battle that will accomplish nothing except getting more people killed. Fleet Commander Zephyr spoke for the first time, her voice carrying the musical quality common to vampire speech. You are the human pilot who gave his blood to save your ambassador. High Priestess Vylara has told us of your sacrifice. But, why should we trust words from one who has been altered by our technology? Because the alteration lets me see things from both perspectives, Marcus replied. I understand human motivations and vampire logic equally well now. And, from both viewpoints, this battle serves no purpose except to feed the war machine that's been manipulating both our peoples. Rodriguez stepped forward. Admirals, I have documentary evidence that the attacks on human colonies were conducted by vampire rogue elements acting without government authorization. Meanwhile, the vampire breeding grounds that prompted those attacks were being poisoned by human mining operations conducted without proper environmental assessment. Both our governments were operating on incomplete information. Admiral Harrison's expression darkened. Even if that's true, Rodriguez, thousands of our people are still dead. Someone has to answer for that. The someone who should answer is the arms dealer consortium that's been feeding false intelligence to both sides, Rodriguez replied, activating a display showing financial records and communication intercepts. They've been playing us against each other for profit while people die. Fleet Commander Zephyr studied the evidence with obvious interest. These records show coordination between human and vampire profiteers. They have been working together to ensure the conflict continues. Which means the real enemy isn't each other, Marcus said. It's the people who have been lying to us from the beginning. People who get rich while we kill each other over misunderstandings. For several long moments, both fleet commanders studied the evidence in silence. Marcus could see the internal struggle playing out on their faces, the desire for vengeance warring against the growing realization that they had been manipulated. Finally, Admiral Harrison spoke. Assuming this intelligence is accurate, what exactly are you proposing? Marcus took a deep breath, knowing that the next few words would determine whether billions lived or died. I'm proposing we call a ceasefire while both governments investigate these revelations. Give peace a chance to work before we commit to mutual destruction. 6 months after the ceasefire at Nexus 7, Marcus stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed diplomatic station Harmony Point, watching ships from both human and vampire fleets dock peacefully at shared moorings. The joint facility orbited a neutral star system, its architecture blending flowing vampire aesthetics with functional human engineering in ways that should not have worked but somehow created something beautiful. His reflection in the viewport showed the changes that had become permanent since his transformation. His skin retained its translucent quality, with networks of pale light visible beneath the surface that pulsed in rhythm with his enhanced circulatory system. His eyes had developed an inner luminescence similar to vampire vision, allowing him to perceive energy patterns invisible to normal humans. Most remarkably, he had not aged a single day since the procedure, while retaining all his human memories and emotions. "You are brooding again," Valara said, approaching from behind with that silent grace that still occasionally startled him. Despite months of working together to establish the peace accords, her presence continued to affect him in ways he did not fully understand. "Not brooding. Reflecting." Marcus turned to face her, noting that she too had changed since their first meeting. The ancient sadness that had marked her features was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like contentment. "The medical teams finished their latest analysis. They're no more certain about my condition than they were 6 months ago. Does that trouble you?" "Sometimes. I don't know what I'm becoming, or how long this transformation will continue. Human doctors say I should be dead. Vampire physicians insist I should be something entirely different. But here I am, caught somewhere in between." Valara moved to stand beside him at the viewport, her shoulder brushing against his. Despite her vampire physiology, she radiated warmth rather than the cold he had expected. "Perhaps being caught in between is precisely what both our peoples needed." Through the transparent aluminum, they could see Ambassador Rodriguez emerging from a transport shuttle accompanied by a delegation of human and vampire diplomats. The peace negotiations had been progressing steadily, with both governments eager to redirect resources away from warfare and toward reconstruction of the damaged colonies. "The arms dealer conspiracy trials begin next week," Marcus noted. "Both human and vampire courts are coordinating their prosecutions. Rodriguez thinks the evidence is strong enough to expose the entire network. Justice for those who profited from our suffering," Valara agreed. "But justice will not restore the lives lost to their manipulations." Marcus studied her profile, noting the slight tightness around her eyes that appeared whenever the conversation touched on the war's casualties. "You're thinking about your brother again." Vailara's expression confirmed his guess. Prince Thane had been among the vampire casualties in the early days of the conflict, killed during a human raid on a medical facility that had been misidentified as a military target. His death had been one of the driving forces behind vampire military mobilization. "The irony is bitter," she said quietly. "Thane died trying to evacuate wounded civilians from a hospital. The human pilots who killed him believed they were striking a strategic target. Both sides acting with honor according to their understanding, both sides serving the agenda of those who wanted war to continue." Marcus reached out and took her hand, marveling as always at the warmth of her skin despite her alien physiology. "Thane's death wasn't meaningless if it helps prevent future wars. His sacrifice led you to seek peace instead of revenge." "No," Valara corrected gently. "Your sacrifice led me to seek peace. Watching you give your life for someone you barely knew, seeing you choose hope over hate even when facing certain death, that showed me there was another way." Their conversation was interrupted by a chime from Marcus's communication device. Admiral Harrison's face appeared on the small display, looking tired but satisfied. "Chun, Rodriguez wanted me to update you on the preliminary agreements. The territorial disputes have been resolved through the mineral rights exchanges you suggested. Both sides get what they need without encroaching on sacred or strategic sites." "What about the reparations issue?" Marcus asked. "Settled. The Vampire Empire will provide medical technology to help rebuild the damaged human colonies. In exchange, human industrial capabilities will be used to construct new vampire habitats and systems that don't conflict with existing territorial claims." Marcus felt relief washing through him. The reparations question had been one of the most difficult obstacles to overcome, with both sides demanding compensation for their losses while being reluctant to admit culpability for the conflict. "There is one more matter," Admiral Harrison continued, his expression becoming more serious. "The Joint Medical Commission has completed their study of your condition. They want to brief you on their findings." Violara squeezed Marcus's hand, offering silent support. The medical commission had been studying his transformation for months, trying to understand the biological and technological processes that had created his hybrid state. Their findings would determine whether his condition was stable, progressive, or potentially dangerous. "Send them up," Marcus said after a moment's hesitation. Dr. Sarah Chen, the human lead researcher, arrived with her vampire counterpart Dr. Kairos within minutes. Both scientists looked excited rather than concerned, which Marcus took as a positive sign. "The short version," Dr. Chen began without preamble, "is that you've achieved something we didn't think was biologically possible. The vampire medical technology didn't just heal you, it rewrote your DNA at the cellular level, creating a stable hybrid genome that combines the best characteristics of both species." Dr. Kairos nodded enthusiastically. "Your enhanced strength, reflexes, and sensory capabilities come from vampire genetic material, while your cognitive patterns and emotional responses remain essentially human. But the integration is so complete that you cannot be classified as either species." "What does that mean for my lifespan?" Marcus asked, voicing the question that had been haunting him for months. "Unknown," Dr. Chen admitted. "Vampire longevity suggests you could live for millennia, but human cellular processes might limit that significantly. Our best guess is that you'll age at roughly 1/10 the normal human rate." Violara's intake of breath was barely audible, but Marcus caught it with his enhanced hearing. "You could outlive everyone you know," she said quietly. "Not everyone," Marcus replied, meeting her burning gaze. "Vampires live for thousands of years, don't they?" The implication hung in the air between them, heavy with possibilities neither had dared voice before. Dr. Kairos cleared his throat diplomatically. "There is another matter we must discuss. The transformation process appears to have created side effects beyond the obvious physical changes." Marcus tensed. "What kind of side effects?" "Emotional resonance," Dr. Chen explained. "The biological matrix that saved your life included neural tissue from High Priestess Violara. As a result, you've developed a form of empathic connection with her. You can sense each other's emotional states across considerable distances." Marcus stared at Violara, suddenly understanding why he had been able to read her moods so accurately, why her presence affected him so strongly. "That's why I always know when you're upset, even when you're trying to hide it. And why I can feel your determination and compassion even when we are apart," Violara confirmed. "I had suspected, but I was not certain." Dr. Kairos leaned forward. "The connection appears to be permanent and may actually be strengthening over time. We believe it's a side effect of the blood magic involved in your transformation." "Is it dangerous?" Marcus asked. "Unknown. But it may explain why your hybrid physiology has remained stable when logic suggests it should have rejected either the human or vampire components." The two doctors departed, leaving Marcus and Violara alone with the implications of their revelation. The empathic bond explained so much about the past 6 months, why they had worked together so effectively, why they seemed to anticipate each other's thoughts, why being apart felt increasingly uncomfortable. "The connection troubles you," Violara observed, though her statement came more from reading his expression than from empathic perception. "Does it trouble you?" She was quiet for a long moment, studying the stars visible through the viewport. "I am heir to an empire that spans dozens of star systems. Vampire nobility does not typically form attachments to beings from other species." Marcus felt his heart sink. "I understand." "You do not understand at all," Violara said sharply, turning to face him fully. "I said vampire nobility does not typically form such attachments. I did not say I cared what vampire nobility typically does." Hope began to bloom in Marcus's chest. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that you saved my empire from a war that would have consumed us all. You sacrificed everything to preserve peace between our peoples. You have spent the past 6 months working tirelessly to build something better from the wreckage of our conflict." She stepped closer, close enough that he could see the starlight reflecting in her luminous eyes. "And I am saying that perhaps it is time for vampire nobility to learn new traditions." Marcus reached up to touch her face, marveling at how perfectly his transformed physiology complemented hers. The political implications would be enormous. A human-vampire hybrid bonded to the heir of the Sanguine Empire would create a living symbol of cooperation between our species, Violara finished. A reminder that peace is possible even between the most unlikely allies. Through their empathic connection, Marcus could feel her emotions as clearly as his own: hope, determination, and something deeper that took his breath away. "Are you sure about this? There's no going back once we acknowledge the bond publicly." "There was no going back from the moment you chose to give your blood for a dying ambassador," Valara replied. "Everything that has happened since then has been leading to this moment." She was right, Marcus realized. From the instant he had volunteered to donate his blood, his fate had become intertwined with hers and with the future of both their peoples. The transformation had not just changed his biology, it had made him into something new, something that could bridge the gap between human and vampire civilizations. "The peace accords are scheduled to be signed next week," Marcus said. "Both our governments will be here for the ceremony. An appropriate time to make certain announcements," Valara agreed. Marcus smiled, feeling a happiness he had not experienced since before the war began. "Think they'll accept a hybrid as royal consort?" "They will accept whatever I tell them to accept," Valara said with regal authority. Then, her expression softened. "Besides, you are hardly just any hybrid. You are the human pilot who gave his blood to save a dying vampire princess, and who spent his life ensuring she would not let him go." Outside the viewport, human and vampire ships continued their peaceful coexistence, crews working together to build something better than either species could have achieved alone. In the medical bay of one of the vampire vessels, Ambassador Rodriguez was meeting with his counterpart from the Sanguine Empire, finalizing details of treaties that would prevent future conflicts. Marcus pulled Valara closer, feeling through their bond that her happiness matched his own. The war was ending, peace was becoming reality, and two species that had been enemies were learning to become allies. It had cost him his humanity, but, in return, he had gained something far more valuable. He had gained a future worth living, and someone to share it with who would understand both sides of his hybrid nature. The human part of him would always remember what it meant to be mortal, to value each day as precious and finite. The vampire part would give him the time to make those memories matter, to help build a lasting peace between the stars. In the distance, the first joint human-vampire colony ship was launching toward a world both species would share. Marcus watched it disappear into hyperspace and knew that someday, children would be born on that world who would never know the fear and hatred that had defined his generation. It was, he thought, a future worth any sacrifice.